putting it together. So yeah, so just so you understand, I'm going to start with a little background on the film, its production, how it came about, and then I'm going to get into a talk on the slave trade, some facts that are not shared in the film about the transatlantic slave trade.
Okay.
So that people, you know, really get a sense of how brutal it was.
Yes.
I think that's
really important. It's really important.
Yeah.
People, I think, when they
Yeah.
show this movie, they, you know, it affected a lot of people. So, you know, a few people that had communicated with me, at least for now.
Right. So that's important. And then I'm going to, you know, talk about how slavery ended. I'm going to talk about the role of Islam for Muslim slaves and how Islam basically was removed from their experiences, their lived experiences, but then how Islam actually reemerged for the African American community, like in the early 1900s, after slavery, after Reconstruction even. So I'll talk about that. And then I'm going to sort of end on my little example about the cultural heritage and contributions of Islam within popular music. And I'll share the music example. And there's a fun little thing about there because, well, you'll see.
Okay, all right. Are you going to talk about like Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, kind of anything like that, or no?
Oh, sure. We can mention some of those in the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might come up. You know, you can raise that if you'd like.
Okay. I think people know. I mean, they know. But you also had said you were going to talk about his daughter, Malcolm's daughter. So somebody else just is in.
Yeah, I'll mention that at the beginning about the various experts and scholars and people involved with the making of the film. I'm happy to mention that. Yeah.
Hi, Diane. I have everybody muted, Diane, just so you know, until the guest speaker speaks. So then I will allow everybody at the question and answer time to unmute themselves. So I just wanted to let you know. You could hear me, and I could see you, but I just thought it would be easier that way. Okay. It's nice to see you. So Diane and I are part of a group in Rye, right? And Harrison, and we work on Interfaith Thanksgiving service.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Welcome.
Yeah. Yes. So
how's the weather up there, Ola? Is it very hot?
Today was actually nice and breezy. I mean, it's hot, but I mean, it's not really that bad. The humidity level's better, and it was a beautiful breeze in the backyard, and birds were eating their food. It was nice. I took a couple of videos, and the cat was chasing everything and everybody. That was interesting. Yeah.
So you don't get that much humidity there, is that right?
No, we do. We do. We get humidity, but today was.
That is us in Washington, D.C.
And Washington, D.C. gets a lot more humidity, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah, it's hard to eat. It's hard to even go outside.
Yeah, it's not that bad. I mean, some days it's not nasty. Even if you go take a walk by the river, it's still humid, and some days there's no breeze. But today was really nice. Today was a nice breeze. Yeah. Okay, so another person has come on, Marlene. Everybody's going to get to know each other at the end. Just trying to see something here. Okay. Hi, Marlena. I have everybody muted, just so you know, as they come in, because the speaker's going to be speaking in a few minutes. And then after he speaks, then everybody can unmute themselves. And if they don't know how, I could do it for them. But hopefully everybody will be able to do that. So Marlene and I work on up in another part of northern Westchester, like Diane and I work in southern Westchester. Marlene and I work at Upper Westchester on a group called Empowering Women through a synagogue in our town, Croton. And it's Jewish women and Christian women and Muslim women get together and do like great programs to help women either overseas or locally, or all kinds of different programs we've been doing for many years. Great.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
So let me just see something here. Trying to figure out, oh, I know how to do it. Trying to figure out something. So when you start speaking, I'm gonna put you on the spotlight video. I know how to do that now. And I'm learning, guy. I'm learning technology. It's great, but I just have to learn all these little details. So we're just waiting for more people to sign on.
Yeah, we still have about 3 minutes until 7.
Yeah. So.
Is your husband going to watch from the other computer?
Yeah, he's gonna go downstairs now.
Excellent.
He's I'm kind of teaching him now about Zoom. So I'm just gonna wait till he gets scared to go down. He just like literally finished working, like came up to carry a bite to eat, and he's going back downstairs. But here he comes in now. But so I have to explain to him that I muted him. I didn't tell him that part. Hold on, I'll be right back.
Sure.
Mahmoud? Mahmoud?
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself.
So we go for walks in the neighborhood, and then we have a pond down the street. We go for walks there, but everybody has to wear a mask there. So I tend to stay in the neighborhood without the mask. And the garden, and our cat gives us a lot of good exercise. She loves to be outside, so we're chasing chipmunks and we're running after her. Trying to teach her not to go to the neighbors and stick to the backyard. So she's getting to learn, it's good. If she goes to the neighbors, I have to sometimes use the hose to make sure she comes back. She goes back real fast. But one time she was outside and we had no idea. She sneaked out when I was barbecuing. Oh my God. And we had no idea. So she was out in the dark for from 7 to 9 at night. Oh, and then by the dining room door is where she usually goes in and out because she's used to that and she knows it's safe. And then I didn't have the lights on in the deck, and all of a sudden I see something walking. I'm like, oh my God, it's a skunk or something. And I turned the light on, it was her. I freaked out. I started crying like hysterical. I had no idea. So she knows now, she always wants somebody with her now. She's kind of learned the hard way.
They do learn.
Yeah.
I had a dog that ran into a skunk when my husband wanted to watch the World Series on a little outside television, and he let the dog walk on his own, and he took off, and we didn't hear him at the door until 3 a.m. The children were so upset that he wasn't home. And he came in smelling of skunk. Thank God for tomato juice.
Oh, God, skunk. Oh, my God. Wow. Diane, do you have any animals? Here, hold on. You can unmute yourself.
Oh,
Yes.
yes. We had a standard poodle for almost 15 years. And I have a nice sized yard, so it was too expensive to fence in the whole yard. But when he used to see a little opening, he ran. And I used to call my son. He was at one end of the yard, I was at the other to try to catch him.
God.
But,
Okay, so more people are signing in now. So let's just mute ourselves, please, if you could. I'm gonna actually start. So a few people. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. I have everybody kind of coming in and mute or mute first to give the speaker to start. And thank you for joining us. We're excited about this program. I'm excited. Daniel's excited. And so people are going to be trickling in as they come in. It's hard to kind of figure out things as who's going to be hold on a second. All right, so as people come in, they're going to hear what Daniel and I just wanted to thank everybody. So I'm going to start. It's 7:03. So thank you guys, everybody. Some people I know, some people I don't know. I thank you for joining the Prince Among Slaves special Zoom discussion and Q&A session with our special guest speaker, Mr. Daniel Tutt of UPF Tutt TV, which stands for Unity Productions Foundations. I hope you found the movie both informative, and interesting, educational, and very moving. I personally cry every time I see this movie. It's very hard. I would like to introduce Mr. Daniel Tutt, who will be speaking about the historical background of the movie for about 15-20 minutes, and then we'll open it for question and answer. Mr. Daniel Tutt's an interfaith activist and philosopher. He's a producer for Unity Productions Foundation, a media company dedicated to combating Islamophobia and promoting interfaith relations through film and media. Daniel developed a nationwide inter and intra-faith dialogue campaign around UPF's Prince Among Slaves film, supported by the National Endowment for the Humanities. As a scholar activist, his work addresses Islamophobia and interreligious dialogue. Daniel is a co-editor of a new book entitled Theologies and Ethics of Justice, New Directions in 21st Century Islamic Thought for IIIT Press. His writings and work have been published in Philosophy Now, the Islamic Monthly, the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, and he has essays published in 3 different books of philosophy. Daniel is professor, lecturer at George Washington University and serves as the director of programs and a producer at Unity Productions Foundation, the filmmaking and educational organization responsible for creating another movie called The Sultan and the Saint. At UPF, he has developed and implemented a number of programs, including American Muslims, Facts versus Fiction, a short film that reached over 10 million people during the 2016 election season, and 20,000 Dialogues, a national interfaith campaign that achieved 20,000 interfaith encounters at the grassroots level. So without any further ado, welcome Mr. Daniel Tutt, and please begin, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is holding up well. Considering the circumstances, I wish I could be with you. My work usually brings me to travel quite a lot around the country and give talks about our films that we make. I was actually in the Winchester area where I met Ola doing a presentation on one of our films called The Sultan and the Saint, about Saint Francis of Assisi and his engagement with Muslims during the Fifth Crusade. Our company, UPF, as Ola has already very nicely articulated, is a group which is committed to using the media for promotion of and strengthening of interfaith and cross-cultural encounters. The film that you saw, Prince Among Slaves, was created in 2007, and it won the Best Documentary at the American Black Film Festival. It is based on a book of the same title by an author named Terry Alford, who's a professor in Northern Virginia, actually at Northern Virginia Community College. He's a great guy. It came out the same year as Alex Haley's famous book, Roots. And this was at the height, you could say, of the civil rights movement. And so at this time, the African-American community was reconnecting with the meaning of Africa, with the meaning of slavery, with the meaning of religion. And really, in many ways, for the first time, and this is one of the things I want to talk about tonight, the Muslim experience in slavery was finally being discovered. And it was being discovered by historians like Alford and Haley. And eventually, up to the 1990s and beyond, archaeology has actually uncovered quite a lot more about the influence of Islam as a religion on the enslaved people that were forced to come to the Americas in what's known as the transatlantic slave trade. And so I actually wanted to start tonight's talk with giving you a few statistics that are, I believe, very important and I believe very sobering when it comes to the slave experience. These statistics, I think, put things in perspective. So between the early 1500s up to 1867, at least 12.5 million men, women, and children were deported from Africa to be enslaved in both South America, the Caribbean, and in North America. 2 million died during the voyage across the Atlantic Ocean, and 10.7 million reached destinations, which included most of the Caribbean islands, South and Central America, Mexico, and the United States. So this is one of the largest, if not the largest, forced migration in human history. At some points, you had such a dangerous voyage that only 1 out of 5 would survive. At other points, it was less dangerous. Of the 10.7 million Africans that were captured and that survived the voyage to the New World, 95% disembarked to the Caribbean and to South America, and Brazil received almost half. The British Caribbean islands received 2.4 million, and the Spanish colonies received 1.3 million. Now that means that 390,000 Africans, less than 4% of the total arrivals, came to the United States, which means that Barbados, the island of Barbados, received more Africans than the United States. And only in the United States did the enslaved population increase through births. Part of the reason that is the case is because the slaves were forced to work on sugar plantations, and the nature of that labor was very, very damaging to the body. And it prevented them from being able to reproduce in those areas in the Caribbean and deeper south. So of the Africans brought to the United States, over 234 years of that period, it resulted by 1860 in a total population of 4.5 million African Americans by 1860. So you see the biggest difference there is that in the United States, the slave populations were in some ways permitted to reproduce, and therefore the population grew more naturally. Part of the reason this is the case is because when you work the crops that the United States was forcing the slaves to work, like cotton, as I mentioned, it's just much less intense on the body. But nonetheless, of course, it is a grueling intensity. Everyone knows the terrible heat that occurs in the American South during the summertime, and having to work 15-hour days out in that heat is unconscionable. Now, amongst the 400,000 slaves that were brought to the United States, scholars say that possibly as many as 25% of them came from a region of West Africa known as Senegambia. And that region was a part of a much wider Islamic empire. And as you know from the film, Abdurrahman Ibrahim Asori was slated to become a king of that area, of what we call Timbuktu or Gambia more generally. But this was an Islamic empire, which was, according to a lot of new archaeological studies that we learned about through the various scholars that consulted the film from Howard University, like the late Suleiman Yang. We've learned that, and we're continuing to learn about the rich intellectual and cultural legacy that African Islamic civilization gave to the world in the form of knowledge, in philosophy, in science, and study, and so on. So Abdurrahman came from a society that had a great deal of sophistication, and that was very unique, and that is a theme that we tried to tease out in the film. So you have a difference amongst the slave population that came from that region, and the biggest difference is literacy. And the reason that is the case is because the Islamic civilization holds literacy to be mandatory, in large reason to learn how to read the Quran, right? So immediately there is a difference there of the Muslim slaves. So, however, one thing we know for sure is that slavery stripped the individual from being able to maintain their literacy, with some exceptions that happened later. But for the majority of the period, things like learning how to read had no utility for the plantation system to flourish. So therefore, it was not necessary. As you saw in the film, there is a great deal of later collaboration in the early 1800s with this sort of budding abolitionist movement. And you saw the very fascinating story of Abdurrahman's encounter with the Irish doctor, Dr. Cox, and that is a very unique encounter. And it's almost one of the happenstance movements of fate that this eccentric doctor, who Abdurrahman's father gave refuge to in Africa, just so happened to encounter Abdurrahman in the market in Natchez, Mississippi. Who would have thought? So in some sense, it was a very fortuitous and very serendipitous occurrence. Obviously, it's what set Abdurrahman onto the path of being able to raise the money to gain his freedom. At that time, slaves could raise money to buy their way out of slavery, right? But taking a step back, it's very important to understand that we do have multiple slave narratives of slaves who became noteworthy individuals. One of them was a man by the name of Omar ibn Said. And Omar ibn Said wrote a biography of his life in Arabic. And he was sort of popular all amongst the East Coast. He would travel, similar to Abdurrahman Ibrahim Asori, amongst kind of more educated liberal circles. So he was a very similar figure. Another example we can reference is Balali Muhammad from Timbo, who was enslaved on what's called the Sapelo Island. Now, the Sapelo Island off of South Carolina is actually a very important place for the Muslim slave experience. It is because this individual, Balali Muhammad, left behind a 13-page Arabic document, which was a kind of code of ethic that he was trying to inculcate amongst the slaves on that island. And it was Islamically influenced. And we have that document. And there is actually a museum in South Carolina that you can visit, and a website you can visit to read that and read its translation as well. And I highly recommend that you do that. So one of the questions that scholars ask is if you had 25% of the slaves from a Muslim background, where did the Islamic experience go? Was it retained in the emergence in the early 20th century of movements like the Nation of Islam amongst the Black community? Or was it erased by slavery? And I will tell you that unfortunately most scholars, historians in particular, tend to hold the view that slavery effectively erased Islamic expression. And what it largely did was prevented rituals, precisely, prevented rituals that were non-Christian from taking place on the one hand. On the other hand, and this is a very important point, slave children were cut off from their fathers. And in some cases, they were cut off from their mothers as well, in many cases, actually. And so you have to understand that that was a strategy for the removal of a continuity of a cultural or a religious practice, you see. So it's a profoundly traumatic aspect of the slave experience that is, you could say, a spiritual type of oppression, if that makes sense. So, and you saw in the example of Abdul Rahman Ibrahim Asori, he married a Christian woman. And if you know much about the Islamic faith, it is, of course, permissible to marry people of the book in most opinions. So it's a story, the Muslim slave experience is a story of dignity, of pride. It's a story that was erased by an oppressive institution, but, and this is the big interesting point I wish to share with you, there are parts of the Islamic experience from the horror of the slave period, which actually have lived on. And one of the ways in which that has happened has actually been through music. Now, there is a musicologist who was around, I think in the turn of the 20th century, by the name of Alan Lomax. And Alan Lomax recorded a number of slave chants, okay, that people would chant as they work the fields. And I'm going to play one of these slave chants for you. And then I'm going to play what's called the adhan in the Islamic tradition, which is the call to prayer. And I want you to listen very carefully and see if you catch some similarity. And then I'm going to play it, and then we'll have a little discussion about it, and I'll share a little bit more. So first we have this is called Levy Camp Holler. So it's a slave chant which probably goes back many generations, which was actually recorded in the early 1900s, but has roots long before that. So hopefully you all can hear this.
Oh, Lord, I woke up this morning, man, I'm feeling bad. Oh, babe, I was feeling bad. Well, I was thinking about the good time. Lord, I want to have.
Okay, now I'm going to play the Adhan, the Islamic call to prayer, right next to that, and see if you can catch some similarities.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Okay, so one thing you notice here is something which in music theory is called melisma. And that is when the voice performs that very interesting sound. And you hear this in a number of popular songs in the blues, but you also hear it in pop music like Whitney Houston. And so melisma has its origin in the Islamic call to prayer. And it refers to the sort of the changing of a note of a syllable while it's being sung. And it gives a kind of wavy intonation, right? And so you see there that the slave chants were incorporating aspects of this tendency for the call to prayer, the Adhan, to hold these syllables and to extend them and to sort of play with them as they go. I'm not a good singer, I cannot reproduce it myself, but I think you catch the influence there. Now, this is not my idea. This is actually the idea of a scholar by the name of Sylviane Diouf. Sylviane actually is a scholar at the Schoenberg Research Center with the New York Public Library. And she's written probably the best book about Muslim slaves in the United States called Servants of Allah. And she's made this very interesting connection. So that's one live wire point of influence. Now, the other point of influence that I think is worth noting here is that by the time you get to the Nation of Islam, which was a kind of proto-Islamic movement, the nation still is around today, but it's been much more fragmented, it's much more diverse. But part of what's interesting about the early experience of the Nation of Islam, which really arose in the early 20th century, you know about figures such as Malcolm X, for example. Well, have you ever wondered why Malcolm X gave himself the name X? Well, there is a sort of popular idea that a slave is given a name from that is not their own, obviously, that is their master's name. And so it's very natural to change the name to represent something completely different. So that's a kind of basic understanding of the idea. But there is actually a deeper way to understand this issue. And the way to understand that is through the concept of the hijra in the Islamic faith. The hijra is the pilgrimage that Muslims make to Mecca. And the motif there, the idea of the hijra, is an idea of travel. And so in slave proto-Islamic religions, a slave would leave their master's home. They would flee. Sometimes they would escape if they were lucky enough to escape. And as they escaped, they would form a new name and they would form a new religion, you see? And so it was an act of killing the master inside. And so Elijah Muhammad, one of the founders of the Nation of Islam, referred to this as the little man. So to become a Muslim was to kill the little man inside, to kill the master who put you in this place where you're not supposed to be. And you discover something new as you leave, as you exit, right? So what I'm trying to say is that there are a number of very important Islamic cultural expressions that still remained, that the slave experience was unable to kill in some sense. And one other very important thing we learned in working with people like Ilyasa Shabazz, the daughter of Malcolm X, she did a whole lecture series on the film Prince Among Slaves. One of the things that we learned was that in the post 9/11 period, the narratives of people like Abdul Rahman and like Omar ibn Said and others have actually gone to rekindle a lot of pride amongst African-American Muslims, and have these slave narratives have been touchstone points for the promotion of a lot of intra-Muslim dialogue amongst immigrant communities and African-American Muslim communities and others. So people are realizing their roots also have a spiritual connection, right? So in some sense, it's not a sad story, it's a story of the perseverance beyond the horrors of the system of slavery. And so we found a great inspiration in this film. This is actually our most successful film in terms of its rebroadcast. It was recently on PBS in Black History Month of 2020. And it continues to be screened and screened and screened. There's something very special about Prince Among Slaves. It's as a story goes, it's a classic story of a figure who has everything, loses everything, and then rebuilds himself. That story arc is very incredible. You know, if it wasn't for Roots, when Prince Among Slaves came out, it probably would have been as popular as Roots. Sometimes things happen that way. So I think with that, I will close my little talk here, and hopefully some of these ideas have given you some questions, and I'd be happy to answer any question that you may have. And let me also say, I have developed a list, actually. Maybe I can say this now. I don't know, Ola, maybe we can wait till
Yeah, go ahead. No, you can say it now. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I've developed 5 suggestions for you, both to learn more, but also maybe things you can do to help others. And let me just pull up my list here. So number 1 is a book recommendation. If you want to learn more about everything I've been talking about tonight, you should order Servants of Allah, and the subtitle is African Muslims Enslaved in the Americas by Sylvain Diouf. Number 2, I highly recommend that you tour the Schoenberg Center for Black Research, and they have a section there on the website called Digital Opportunities, and you can go see a visual of a lot of the things I mentioned to you, and it's very enlightening. You can also start a dialogue with one of our other films. We offer all of these for free for folks that want to discuss our films. We've created over a dozen films, all having to do with interfaith themes, with the Islamic experience throughout history. I mentioned already our film Sultan and the Saint. That's an excellent film for understanding Christian-Muslim dialogue. And we have many others that I highly encourage you. And the website there is UPF, U as in Unity, P as in Paul, F as in Frank, .tv. T as in television, V as in Victor. Number 4, again, I want to recommend the Schoenberg Center, which is affiliated with the New York Public Library. And they have a number of books on the theme of Black liberation. So with the Black Lives Matter movement, they have some of the most excellent books, I think children's books all the way to adult books to look at. And then finally, with Prince Among Slaves itself, if if you go to our homepage at upf.tv, click on the Prince Among Slaves logo of the film, go to teachers, you'll find that we have lesson plans for middle school to high school educators utilizing the film. And they are fabulous lesson plans that go into all kinds of great detail with a number of activities that students can do and so on. So those are 5 ideas to learn more and take some action. So thank you very much.
I'll be sending them all on an email tomorrow, and I'm also going to add one more from my side. There's an organization, many organizations that are doing a lot of things, but one is particularly called the Al-Maghrib Institute has this a class that you can take online called Deeper Roots that I actually signed up for, and I couldn't stop listening to all the modules. Like usually I take my time, I listen to one and then the next day, and I just couldn't stop. The content was so interesting and so moving, and they even have like a an actual course curriculum that you can print out if you want to print it. I like, I'm still in the old school. I like to read things on paper sometimes, but they have that, and you can listen to this over and over, and you can, when you can pay as you need, as you can afford, and you can have it forever. So you can listen to it for a long, long time. So if anybody has any questions, please just unmute yourself and feel free to ask the questions. Go ahead, Layla.
Hi, hello. I'm here with my sister Yasmin Al-Askari, and we were so fortunate to see the opening of the Sultan and the Saint in Washington when it first came out, and shared it with a lot of other groups. So we were happy to be able to do that. This again was a wonderful, wonderful documentary, and I shared it again with some other groups that I have in New York City. My question is, how was the reaction of the other Black communities that you showed this film to? I saw that at the end of this film you had some of the family and descendants, and that was really amazing. But what has been the conversation in the Black community about their roots and how they might incorporate it, aside from people saying, yes, they've become Black Muslims, or like Atala Shabazz, and they've came to a different understanding of what her father called the true Islam. And we were privileged to go to Sunday school with her, but I'm curious how the rest of the communities have reacted now.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, it's a very diverse community. You have, we're making a film right now actually about American Islam, another film. And one of the things that I learned, just as an aside, that's so interesting, is that, you had the Nation of Islam, but before the nation you had what was called Garveyism. And Garvey, from Marcus Garvey, who was a proto-Islamic preacher, was preaching a discourse of self-empowerment, of not much different than the theme of Black Panther, the movie. He was preaching an idea that, you should love your heritage, you should find pride in your history. And so Ilyasa Shabazz, who became kind of a spokesperson for the film, she always said that her father, Malcolm X, always said that the main problem, one of the problems, is that people can't come to terms with slavery. White people can't face it, and Black people don't know how to confront the trauma that it opens up. And that a film like this, can help us start that conversation. And so that has been true. I mean, as I mentioned, it won the best documentary at the American Black Film Festival the year that it came out. So it was widely perceived to be a positive contribution. It was not perceived as, here's a Muslim project. Not at all. It was seen much broader than that, much more universally than that. One of the more interesting outcomes that was surprising to us was it was used as a way for immigrant Arab and South Asian groups that are Muslim to come into a better understanding of African-American Islam. there are some divisions, mostly in terms of the way that mosques and Islamic centers are built. They often are ethnic or racially, but not always. I mean, I do a lot of research on American Muslim communities, and it's amazing that in all of the major cities, most of the major Islamic centers were very multiracially developed, multiculturally developed. You had white converts, and you had Arabs and South Asians and African Americans all working together to build an institution. That's very common, So the film helped build bridges, I think, quite a lot, both within the Muslim space, but also educated people in the roots of the spiritual side of slavery. I mean, as I was saying in my presentation, the fact that you remove a spiritual tradition from people by breaking up their family, and then by not allowing them to read. I mean, the first word in the Quran is read. So, if you deprive people of that, it's very hard to maintain an Islamic faith. And that's very interesting that Abdul Rahman and Omar ibn Said still kept Arabic inside, that's a kind of perseverance that they exhibited. So I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it does.
Yeah, it's good. Very helpful. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Anybody else have any other questions? I know there's some people here that were teachers and maybe still are, I'm not sure, but please feel free. This is a chance to not to be shy. You can unmute yourself and ask whatever question you'd like. Mahmoud, don't you have a question?
Okay,
Leila, you have another question?
Yasmin does.
I was just going to ask, are there any other movies in the pipeline that we can expect to come out?
Yeah, about Lamia's poem, right?
Yeah, we have a new film. It's actually not a documentary. It's our first feature film.
Yeah.
It's an animated film, and it's called Lamia's Poem. It will be completed probably in the winter of 2020. And so this is a film which is about the Syrian refugee, Syrian war. And it is similar to The Breadwinner. I don't know if you've seen that on Netflix with supported by Angelina Jolie. It's kind of in that genre, it'll have that feel. But it's a story that is a fantasy story based on a rendezvous through a dream world scenario of a young Syrian girl who's fleeing the violence of the war and corresponds in the dream world with the poet Rumi, because Rumi actually was a refugee himself.
Yeah.
So that's the premise, and it was at the Cannes Film Festival, so it's making some waves. And we hope to get a good distribution for it.
Good. Very exciting.
When will the trailer come out? When will the trailer come out?
We're not yet publicizing it.
Okay.
We do have a trailer, but yeah, I think the official trailer will probably come out in the fall and winter of 2020.
Okay.
We're fortunate that it's an animated film and not a documentary because of COVID. All of the work can be done inside. A documentary requires physical shooting, so we're fortunate in that regard. But like I mentioned, we are also working on a documentary on American Islamic history. I can't say much more than that, but it's going to be very cool.
Sounds fantastic, fascinating.
Yeah, I love it because I just get to research American Islamic history, and I find it very fascinating.
So you're the one who does all this stuff. Mahmoud, do you have a question, or anybody else? Khadija?
Yes, I have. Okay, after Khadija.
Khadija, go ahead.
Hi. Thank you so much for that presentation. I have a recognition to make before the question. I really appreciated that you recognize that there's a separation of like culture and religion that also happened in slavery. I feel like that doesn't get enough attention when it's taught in the school system, especially the public school system. I feel like it's mostly just based on like, oh, here are people's like experiences and here's what we can do. But there's not a recognition for like, people are really trying to reclaim their culture. And even if it's not in a way of like fully practicing Islam or like fully studying the history of it, there's like that recognition that is going on among people. And I just want to say thank you for that. And then the question that I had was about the songs and the words that have come out of the Islamic experience of slavery, and just like, was it just songs, or like is humming also something that was evolved out of it, just from the Islamic point of view? Because I know that regardless of whether African Americans are spiritual or not, humming is something that is done to like soothe the soul. So I just wanted to know if that was like developed in part of the practice. And
Yeah.
like, Ola, if you could also answer that just from like personal experience, that's also fine.
Yeah, so the idea is that because the religion was not allowed by the slave owners, forms of it still seeped into what's called sometimes slave religion, or kind of sort of syncretic expression. And so the argument is that the intonation of melisma, which is the changing of the note of a syllable while it's being sung, like you hear in the call to prayer, it also actually has a precursor in some Indian hymns. But because the slaves were not familiar with the Indian hymns, it's much more likely that they incorporated this from the 25% of the slaves who had heard the adhan on, 5 times a day, right? Coming from a Muslim society. So it's a very plausible theory, but it is a theory that, I could play for you Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You, the movie with Kevin Costner. Remember that one? Where, she does
Yes.
Hold the I, where she says, I, that?
Yeah.
That's the style, you see? That's the style that is very similar to the adhan, right? And you can follow that on through blues music as well. So that's the very interesting argument here that's being presented. And I think that is so amazing. It's really beautiful. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. So I never thought about the enunciation and change of words in a song. I would just always be like, oh, that's like really beautiful. And like just recognizing that the person's trying to get a certain emotion across with the words.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is really beautiful for me to learn.
The closest thing we have is, if you look, I don't know if you know the artist Moby. He's a pretty well-known music artist. He incorporated and popularized the work of Alan Lomax. But Alan Lomax traveled throughout Black culture in the early 20th century, recording slave chants, like I mentioned. And so we have that proof, but we also have a number of ethnographic commentaries from, 3rd or 4th generation African-American people who would tell interviewers, academic ethnographers, about how they would hear how they would hear the call to prayer more directly during the working day on a slave plantation. So the notion here is that the call to prayer was a kind of motif that was incorporated into slave music. It sort of was a background of it, a very important background, let's say.
So, I think it's important to I'm going to play a verse that I really like. It's from a prayer in the Quran called Nur. It's a prayer of light. And what happens with people who actually recite the Quran is they're called reciters. And the more beautiful voice you have, and the more beautiful it sounds. You know, the Adan, when the Adan is called, they kind of elongate, you know, some of the words, and it's repetitive. So if anybody has a question before I play it, please ask the question, and then I'll play the verse, because I'd like the questions to come on in. Diane, you have a question?
Just a comment with the Black Lives Matter movement. This certainly would be another relevant film for people to see. You know, that's what I was thinking of.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Hola.
Okay, so hold on a sec. Go ahead, Mahmoud. Do you have a question?
You receive a reward from Allah.
I'm sorry, these stupid things have ads, but you can't escape ads from YouTube. But I hope you guys can hear it. Where's the microphone here, Mahmoud, on this laptop?
I have no idea.
Can everybody hear it?
If I can hear you, there's a microphone somewhere.
Okay. Can you guys hear this?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they have the translation in a few different languages. Let's see if we can see.
يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة لا شرقية ولا غربية يكاد زيتها يضيء ولو لم تمسسه نار نور على نور.
Yeah, you can hear the wavy intonation, kind of holds on, you know. That's the key point, and that is repeated in a whole range of pop music, jazz music, and so on. So I think it's very interesting to link that back to an Islamic influence. I think it's an idea that should be more widely known.
Yeah. And what's interesting is like they can actually recite the same verse in a slightly different kind of. You can hardly notice it. My husband, because his Arabic is so good, he will notice. He goes, "Oh, he's saying it in a different way now." Because I would think it would be he was repeating the same thing over and over. When I played this at a church in Briarcliff. And I was like, oh, wow, the guy's saying it over. My husband says, no, it's actually slightly different each time. And it's only if you have, I guess, that Arabic good ear that you can actually hear that. So I'm getting there slowly but surely. So there's like when we went on the pilgrimage, you can get like the whole Quran, and there's so many different reciters. And now, of course, it's all on YouTube and on the app. And even in the app, you have different reciters. So you could pick whoever sounds nice. Like I have a certain person that I like the sound. My husband likes somebody else. So, and they have competitions like in Africa and so many places in the Middle East of who could be the best reciter. So it's like a big deal. And so the Quran is like, it's literally Arabic poetry. It's very poetic and it rhymes. It totally rhymes. And obviously now that I've been for the past few years reading and it's easy to actually memorize once you understand and once you get into that rhythm. It's made so that people can orally have it in their heart and memorize it. So you'll have people, if they don't have the Quran, they could still recite it because they had it memorized. So, and that's a pretty big deal. The Quran is a big book. And so that's like always, like they'll have a whole stadium. Like here we have soccer stadiums and watch people in football stadiums. They have soccer stadiums of people doing competitions on reciting the Quran. And people will come to a football stadium to watch this. So that's how important it is in so many parts of the world. That doesn't get enough, obviously, publicity for people just to understand how important it is to, and the Quran in Arabic, which is very important to state, is the same no matter where you go in the world. No matter where anybody has the same Quran in Arabic, in Indonesia, in Barbados, in Australia, in Alaska, wherever you go, it's the same. And obviously it's been translated in many languages, but it's almost like if we read a poem that rhymes and we try to translate it in another language, you know, kind of misses. So people always ask me, you know, why Arabic and why do you have to read the Quran in Arabic? So once you understand a language and it has a rhythm and that's different. And it's when in a translation, like sometimes we'll sit and we have a family class on Sundays and we'll discuss even a verse, and we'll have to read several translations to help the kids understand it, help ourselves, and it's you know, the language is very rich. So just wanted to, you know, help that.
Well, I think all of what you're saying about that is so important, but I think it also talks about the portability of the Quran and how when the slaves brought it with them to America, people always will say, oh, that's so difficult to memorize the whole Quran. But if I asked many of the people who are on here, like, how many of the Beatles songs do you know? I know many musicians and they can sing, they know the words to 500 songs, easy, right? And how do you do it? It's because your ears attuned. It was a language they understood and it's rhythmic and it was repeated over and over. I mean, there wasn't any YouTube, so you heard the same surah over and over and over. So when you left, this was the songs in your head. And I think when they came here, that was the ability to keep these rhythms in their head. And then eventually, like we were hearing the slave chants, that was just fascinating, but also to see how they could bring a book when they came with nothing in their hands, right? But they came with it in their hearts. So I see it as a very different movement of it. But it's interesting how things, when they're lost, they still remain in a song, and that's a spirit, and that's with the sharing. And I think that was great to tie all that together and then see how it's come down when you still hear that rhyme and you can still hear that sound. I mean, you hear it in the musicians in Spain, and they still go back to the maqamat for you know, the old Arabic and what their poetry and competitions were about. But I think getting back to our main point is how to then bring all of this information and rich culture and celebrate it and bring it forwards really into the schools these days. And how does that get distributed on a wider base? It's almost like a good timing for it with all the kids doing so much virtual learning. You've got something prepackaged for them. You've got the questions that you have for the teachers. And I'm just curious how, when the teachers are struggling with lesson plans, how do you get this shared with the schools at this time and shared, you know, really in Middle America and other places? I mean, we have a lot of activity in New York City, but that's different from when you get into, you know,
Mississippi,
the Midwest and you know, Utah, and very different populations, and how to get some excitement around this and understanding. And it's really about understanding.
Yeah, thank you for that. There are various services which allow you to, so what we found with reaching educators is you don't really want to go through the school boards. That's very laborious because each school board is a committee. And in the line of work that we do, if you have one person on that committee who maybe has a slight, maybe anti-Islamic orientation or, you know, I don't know, maybe an issue of discrimination, I don't know, but that happens, then the whole thing is rejected. So, but rather, if you go straight to teachers individually and say, here's a film you can use that is, you know, meets all of the lesson plans are certified by Georgetown University. That's who we work with in creating the lesson plans, and other universities, but mostly Georgetown. And so they're certified with national, state, and local teaching standards. So, you know, that combined with the fact that it's on PBS, it's a high quality production, 9 times, well, not 9 times out of 10, but a very high rate of teachers will say, great, you're giving me a free film and lesson plans, thank you. So it's just a matter of emailing them and marketing to them. And there's a lot of ways to do that, actually, to market to teachers. And so we get grants from foundations and others to do that. And we've probably distributed this film, to many thousands of teachers, I would say.
How can we help you with some of our organizations? Is there a link or something that we can connect with you to distribute? Maybe Ola can send it to us afterwards so that it's another resource that can be shared.
Yes.
Yeah, the 5 ideas I shared, I'll share that with Ola, and then it's all links. So you can visit the Schoenberg Center, as I recommended, which is a very good resource. You know, once the COVID is over, God willing, you can go there and visit, meet with their scholars. They have resident scholars. You know, there's also the, just a number of things in New York area that are of interest. To learn more about the history of Muslim life beyond just the African American. There's so many things I could recommend. They just have a new center for this study of Muslims in Brooklyn, which is very interesting, ran by a friend of mine. So there's a lot of cool things, and I'm happy to share the links.
Yeah. What I think I like, for me, like locally, when my kids were growing up here, the local library, the kindergarten library in the school, and so on, as they progressed, had nothing on Ramadan, nothing on any kind of books. And I would literally, when they were young, buy a book for them and buy 2 books in the same book, and I would donate to the library. Actually, I would buy 3, donate to the public library, the local school library, and 1 for my kids. So, but not everybody does that, and not everybody gets, like I was on the PTA, not everybody gets on the PTA. I guess, you know, how could we get more, you know, I mean, we can go back to our mosques and recommend that. But yeah, if there was like a way that, you know, I would, you know, love to buy like a whole bunch of these DVDs and then go, when the mosque starts opening, and tell everybody to buy one and go donate it to their, especially if their kids are in high school or middle school. Would you recommend more, or high school and college?
Unfortunately, we are officially in a post-DVD world. That's one of the things we have to let go of, thanks to technology. But we don't sell DVDs anymore, actually. Like, so you can find them on PBS. I think PBS has a reserve. But we provide just links. If you sign up, you have to go through a sign up thing on our website. But once you do that, you'll get a Vimeo link of the film, or you can get it on Amazon for Prince Among Slaves.
I see.
But for teachers, it's better to give them a free link, something free.
Okay.
So.
Anne,
Yes, I think Anne has a question or a comment.
Yes. Okay.
You'll have to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Anne.
Okay. In the Muslim faith, in the Muslim faith, do they also do call and response?
What do you mean by that?
Because in the with the slaves, they always did call and response. They would sing, and then there would be an answering, singing. And I wondered if they got that from the Muslim religion.
Oh, you mean like tikbir and like things like this, like Allahu Akbar, that kind of response?
Yeah, I wondered if it came from.
That's an interesting idea. I'm not sure.
Well, you know,
I think on the Eid, we have something a little bit similar to that. And there's the chant that's always sung on the Eid prayer days. And so we sing along with it. But some of the classic call and response, which is done in churches, we don't do that as much in the Muslim world. But we do have chanting. And the chanting is, although, you know, on the Eid days, when we have before the prayer start. And yes, exactly.
My husband has them better memorized than me. But there's also like for Hajj, to go to the pilgrimage, there is a very strong thing that everybody has to say, Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. So here I am coming to you, Labbaik Allahumma labbaik, coming to you, God, I'm coming to you. And so now, because we can't, obviously, this totally limited to only people who are going to be living there this year. And a lot of people who had plans are very upset. So a lot of the scholars are telling us, and our imams, you know, you could, you know, they're not going to maybe not even have like the prayer at the mosque, or we usually have it sometimes in a hotel. So they're telling us at home, just, you know, recite it within your own family. So, but the call and response, the only time I really heard it is when I was in the pilgrimage there, because it's just such a big, you know, a lot of people praying at the same time. So the only thing that resonates in my mind is there's, you know, they would say there'd be the actual person who's leading the prayer, and there'll be somebody behind him who will repeat what he was saying. So, and then we just follow. So the person leading the prayer would say Allahu Akbar, and the person behind him would say it again. And am I correct, Mahmoud? Is that yeah? So that's yeah. That's so that would be the, you know, and then that's when we have to follow. So
they're taking that from the Muslim faith.
No, that is the Muslim faith. That is the pilgrimage. That's what I'm saying. So yeah, they're taking that. Yeah, they're taking. Yeah, yes.
Took that from their faith when they came here. Then
yes.
They brought that from They brought that to America, and when they were like plowing the fields.
Yes.
And they said, I don't know what they said, but they said something, la da da da, and then someone said la da da da.
Yeah.
Da 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 da. So they took that
rhythm.
That tradition was part of their faith.
Yes. I have actually a question as far as the word Alleluia. Did that come? I mean, I've listened to different scholars, so I just wanted to ask your opinion, Daniel. Did the word Hallelujah actually come from Allahu Akbar? Like they kind of twisted the word, you know, but they changed whatever the word you used to.
Yeah, I think it's possibly an invention of the syncretic intermeshing of the Abrahamic religions in Spain over 600 years. I mean, even in ole, 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 that's also from Allah. So there's a number of sort of Al-Andalusian terms that exist. In fact, we created a great film called Cities of Light, The Rise and Fall of Islamic Spain, that has a brand new website created by my company and Georgetown University. And we have this beautiful exercise on the website of a contemporary home, and all of the objects in the home which came directly from the Islamic Spain period, from the newspaper to orange juice to the guitar to, you know, rugs. Like, there's all of these things which have their origin in this place where the three great religions all coexisted. So it's really a tragedy that people insist on saying the Judeo is Christian culture with leaving Islam out. It just doesn't even make sense to leave Islam out. It's foolish, really. So, but yeah, I don't know the exact answer, Ola, but my guess would probably be from that period.
Mahmoud, do you have a question?
Yes, I do, finally.
Okay.
Okay, from my reading in general, when the settlers came here, they used to build things. First, they start going to their roots, which is if they coming from England, they start building things from England, like the same style, the same using different materials. So my question, because when you move somebody even by force from his culture and bring it over here, I'm sure you're not moving a cabinet, you're moving a culture by itself. Even one person or two person or 10 or 20, he has a culture. So is there anything that, because you said there's a lot of writing which they left it behind. I'm an architect, so if they have any a small mosque, a small thing which has been built in that time?
Yeah, they have some archaeological research that indicates that it was proto-Islamic expression. For example, there is some indication that circumambulation around churches was practiced by the slaves. Circumambulation is when you circle like the Kaaba.
Yes.
So they would take that practice, right? So they would take these kind of loose Islamic practices and sort of inculcate them into these. But Islam was prohibited by the slave masters, and you can see why. I mean, it was a powerful technology. It was a technology of organization. So if the Muslim slaves had literacy and they're able to teach other slaves, it is a message of empowerment. It's a message of resistance. So it had to be prevented.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, what emerges is a kind of more primordial expression of the faith in fragments, you see? So the notion that the slaves were permitted to build their own structure, religious structure, is out of the question, as far as I know.
Okay.
And by the time that more rights were slowly granted, Christianity had already infused a couple of generations, you see.
Yeah.
So there's you miss things. And so in the document I send, there's a number of books that, again, Sylvia and Dayus would probably be the best place to start on this, because she's pulled together all of the ethnographic, all of the historical, all of the archaeological knowledge that we have here. And it's not much, but it's enough to kind of surprise you. I'll put it that way. It's enough to really say this. There was a real moment, a real influence of the Islamic experience that kind of lasted on. You know. I hope that answers your question.
Okay.
So she's the one that wrote The Servants of Allah that you recommended, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, she's very good. She was an advisor, and she's obviously in the film. Michael Gomez at NYU. He's another great scholar. Unfortunately, we lost our main spiritual advisor for the film, Dr. Suleiman Yang, who, as a young scholar at Howard, consulted Alex Haley when he was writing Roots. Suleiman Yang is the greatest African studies Islamic scholar, I think, of our time. And he recently died a couple of years ago. So he was a great inspiration and really so knowledgeable. There's many lectures by him on that you can find on YouTube. There's a good place to start as well. He's so much knowledge there.
Okay, you can send me his info also, and I'll add it to the list.
Sure.
So I'm just gonna do a little promo. This is the movie. I bought the DVD for PBS because I just thought it was important to show it. And I think, you know, that's the other movie that I'll watch. And there's so many that I have that I've shared actually with the local library. I got some Resistance, and you know, sometimes you win some, sometimes you don't. So then now we have Zoom, and we have live stream. So it's really been a different world now.
Yeah. Well, maybe I could, if we have a little bit more time, I could share my screen to show you just a couple of the websites so that you're familiar with them when you visit them. or do
Yeah.
we not have time? I don't know what our
Yeah,
time
no,
is.
sure. I'm just gonna put multiple, I think you can share. Go ahead, try.
Okay. So I want to start by just sharing this new website I mentioned to you. Oh no, sorry, it says I can't share.
Wait, hold on. Let me see if I can,
It's like a Zoom setting. It says I can't do it.
no, I'm gonna switch it. Okay.
Oh yeah, now it does.
Yeah,
All right. So can you all see this one?
Yes.
yeah.
So this is the website we just launched. It's new, and it's dedicated to. I mean, we're talking hundreds of pages here to the history of 600 years up to 1492, which kind of connects to this because, you know, when Christopher Columbus came to the Americas, it's likely that he had, you know, Muslims and Jews on board, in part because they're fleeing the Inquisition. But this period is very rich, and I highly recommend this. IslamicSpain.tv is the URL, and you can go to places like this and study, you know, medicine, chemistry, botany, all of these sort of incredible aspects of the time and culture. Let's see, you can also take a look here, Islamic Spain, What's for Breakfast?
Wow.
And go through and learn about all of these various objects in this room. And it's kind of like a guided tour that will show, like the children's book bag has algebra and chemistry books. Those were invented during the Islamic Spain period. Here you have the breakfast nook is located in the alcove. The fashion that the daughter is wearing, orange juice. There's all of these very fascinating points. So I think you probably gathered this is sort of one of the techniques we use in our films, is to sort of bring out historical cultural legacies of different time periods. And then here is our main website. And you can see at the Prince Among Slaves page, if you go to teachers down here on the left, you'll see some wonderful lesson plans that you can download here. And you'll get an immersion into Muslims in early America with multiple lessons there, the transatlantic slave trade, some of the things I was teaching about earlier, and then some more contemporary things on identity. So these are great for teachers from middle to high school.
Even college, I would think, too.
Yeah, some college, sure. Yeah. So, and this is a little thing from our new film, Lamia's poem that I was mentioning to you. That's a little glimpse of the artwork.
It's beautiful, just beautiful.
Yeah. So
the Cities of Light is basically, if you want to just go to that, you just type IslamicSpain.tv, or you can do through UPF.tv also, right?
You could find it either place. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
we're also
easier for everybody to memorize UPF.tv.
Yeah. We also do look at this as a webinar that we recently did. You can watch the video on Malcolm X and Black Lives Matter movement.
Sheikh Mendez is excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great conversation that we did, and we've done a number of others. This one was wonderful on how to deal with toxic stress. So we just do, you know, a number of, this one is teaching for young people how to make a career in film and media, for example. So, you know, this was a great conversation we had with an author of a Rumi scholar. So anyways, that's a little snapshot of our work.
So very rich, very rich. Anybody have, Marlene, do you have any question? You want to unmute yourself, Marlene, so we can hear your question? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. It wasn't a question, it was a comment. I just automatically
Speak up a little bit so we can hear you.
Okay, I can automatically, in my mind, see this as an adult education pursuit as well, in different groups that run adult ed courses in various houses of worship, be they churches, synagogues, mosques. It's a way, I thought when you were playing the music, I saw the natural sound comparison between the prayer of the Muslim, of the Christian, and of the Jew. The sound is very similar in so many ways. And that's another avenue to branch into other faiths, because music always touches the soul. That's the way we relate to humanity. I'd love to see something like that happen.
Yeah, thank you very much. We do
That's it.
consider, I agree, we do consider a lot of our work as adult education. Absolutely. You know, when it comes to teaching the wider public about Islam and Muslims, it does not matter your education level. Whether you went to Harvard University, it does not mean that you're somehow exempt from holding discriminatory views or prejudicial views or even racist views. So a lot of it's adult education, but a lot of it is also kind of anti-racism education as well, because you know, we have a lot of the center of racism in America is towards the Black population, but and Jews. But that's what I was saying. But outside, moving out, it has a similar structure. You see, so you have to deal with it in a kind of similar way.
Yeah.
So ours is just one approach
Right.
to that.
I like it.
And of course, prejudice. I mean, because Marlene and I work with the immigrants, and we, our group is actually helping a Venezuelan immigrant family, and so one of my talks was trying to get people to kind of be sensitive to how hard it is for immigrants to come, when they come, the difficulty that they go through. I mean, it's not easy to pack up and leave your home country and your family, your extended family and everything. So I kind of, talk about my experience as a child and, what my parents went through, to kind of give it like, reality, so that people can understand and be sensitive. When I came here, I was 10. And what was the question that was most asked of me on a nonstop basis in 5th grade in Austin, New York? Are you Black or white? And I had no idea what that meant. I mean, it was something that was never discussed in our culture. Me growing up for the 10 years that I grew up in Egypt, I would just answer saying, I don't know, I'm Egyptian. People, my family, I think, has a rainbow from white as snow to black as coal. And it was something that, in Egypt, it's like, all kinds of colors and people, and same thing in all the Middle East. I mean, there's all, from blonde to blue eyes to, black and brown. It doesn't ever matter. And of course, you see how the beauty of that in the pilgrimage. It's just unbelievable. It's really phenomenal. But, I used to come home and they used to tell me, do you have a pet camel? And did you live in a tent? And I would come home crying. I'm like, Mom, I've never been in a camel. I don't even know I've been in a tent. And when I would go back to you and say, like, I've got to go on a camel so people could believe I actually went on. But those are these children. They were young. They were 10, and this is what their perception or what they learned of what Egypt is about, and let alone a lot of people here growing up as perception of Africa, and I mean, I learned just recently that there's the countries in Africa are paying billions and billions of dollars to France in tax money. For what? Maybe you can speak to that more intelligently than me, Daniel, but it's something that's really kind of hurts my heart deeply.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the notion of a debt jubilee is something that was on the is becoming more and more necessary because of the IMF loans that have resulted in crippling conditions for African countries. And now, of course, the millennial and pre-millennial generations in America with student loan debt are experiencing something similar. So, you know, there's been a lot written on the notion of cancellation of debt, has a long-standing tradition for thousands of years. And I think probably in the future, we may face a scenario in which cancellations of debt is necessary, maybe. In part because the structure of the IMF debts in Africa were so unjust to begin with, and had a root in a colonial framework of control and domination, and so you can't really understand them outside of that kind of neo-colonial basis. So they've been very harmful in many ways, I believe. But that's a whole other thing. I don't know if we have the time to get into it.
No.
Anybody else have any questions or reflections or, you know, anything? Please feel free. Khadija, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I should not be here tomorrow.
Well, okay. Well, so I have here a comment from Layla and Yasmin saying, thanks so much, Professor Tutt. Must say goodbye for now. Wonderful movie. And so.
All right.
All right. I thank you all so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And, you know, I have this recorded, so I will figure out how to send that. And so, you know, if you want to tell your friends about this experience, God willing, I will ask my Zoom techie friend to let me know how to do that. So, but thank you so much, Professor Tutt. Thank you for everything that you've shared with us. It's been a wonderful experience, and thank you all for participating. I really appreciate it.
Ola.
Okay, well.
Thank you, Ola, for organizing.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I will say goodbye.
So much.
Be well.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Be well.
Bye. 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 Bye.